In Massachusetts, 1932 marked the emergence of a youngling destined to be an infamous persona in the criminal realm, Joseph Barboza Jr., dubbed as the Animal. With the passage of time and the shift in seasons, the harsh landscape of life began to shape young Joseph. The streets became his classroom, imparting wisdom that no traditional institution ever could. Enticed by the allure of the criminal world, Joseph utilized his skills from the boxing world and became a brutal enforcer, willingly plunging himself into its obscure depths. As the 1960s dawned, Joseph Barboza had undergone a transformation. He had morphed into the Animal, a feared assassin for the Patriarcha crime syndicate in New England. His name echoed ominously in the criminal realm, a stark warning of the cost of betraying the Patriarcha clan. This metamorphosis was an unhurried downward spiral, propelled by a blend of circumstances and choices. His engagement in organized crime intensified, his hands smeared with the blood of those unlucky enough to cross the Patriarcha family. With each fulfilled contract and successful hit, Barboza's reputation swelled, his name becoming indicative of dread and demise. However, life, as it's commonly known, is full of unexpected twists, and Joseph Barboza, the infamous hitman, the dreaded Animal, was not immune to them. A man who flourished in the criminal realm, living by the rule of violence, was on the verge of a game-changing move. But as we'll soon uncover, even the most hardened offenders can turn over a new leaf. In the pitiless domain of the Mafia, allegiance is paramount. However, for Barboza, allegiance morphed into a one-way road. Joseph Barboza, dubbed as the Animal, was a feared Mafia enforcer for the Patriarcha crime dynasty in New England during the tumultuous 1960s. He was a devoted soldier, carrying out the family's grimy tasks with brutal effectiveness. But beneath this facade of fidelity, a tempest was taking hold. The Mafia, the very organization to which he had pledged his life, abandoned him. The specifics are obscured, cloaked in the confidentiality that is the Mafia's signature. But it's evident that Barboza felt intensely wronged. The feeling of treachery was sharp, and the pain provoked a rage within him. Barboza witnessed his world disintegrate around him. The existence he had erected on the principles of allegiance and compliance was decimated. The Mafia, his family, had deserted him. This treachery was the instigator that morphed Barboza from a faithful enforcer to a man with a thirst for retribution. What ensued was a resolution that would reverberate throughout the underworld. Barboza resolved to revolt against the Mafia. He opted to become a whistleblower, a choice tantamount to murder in the Mafia's chronicles. It was a bold maneuver, a perilous game of double-dealing that could cost him his existence. But for Barboza, it was an opportunity to make those who deserted him suffer. He sought out the FBI, proposing a deal they couldn't decline. In return for protection, he would supply them with insider knowledge about the Mafia's schemes. This decision denoted a pivotal moment in Barboza's life and a significant setback for the Mafia. Suddenly, the predator became the prey. Barboza was now a targeted individual within the Mafia, but he was ready to confront the repercussions. He was geared to retaliate, to make his traitors atone for their infidelity. Betrayed and enraged, Barboza was on the brink of biting the hand that once nourished him. In an astonishing turn of events, the notorious hitman morphed into the FBI's clandestine ace. The individual feared for his ruthless proficiency in the underworld was now an operative for the other team. Joseph Barboza, previously a devout henchman for the mob, had become a wellspring of information for the FBI. However, this was far from a tale of atonement. Barboza's interaction with the FBI was a thorny one, tainted by hues of dishonesty and subterfuge. His motives were not of seeking forgiveness for past deeds, but a pursuit of vengeance against those who had forsaken him. His commitment to the mob was unyielding until they discarded him. So he responded in the only way he knew how. He retaliated this time, aided by the law. The FBI, in a desperate attempt to undermine the influential Patriarcha criminal syndicate, saw a glimmering prospect in Barboza, his liberation in return for collaboration. Barboza, sensing a path to survival and retribution, consented. He was incorporated into the witness protection program, his prior existence wiped clean and a fresh one meticulously devised. Yet it was in the legal arena that Barboza truly made his mark. He was the key witness in a litigation that stirred the criminal underworld. 6 men stood accused of a homicide that Barboza himself, alongside his accomplice Vincent Flemmi, had carried out. Yet he sat on the stand, unflappable, weaving a narrative so persuasive that the jury was left with no option but to trust him. The defendants were convicted one after another, while Barboza took refuge behind the facade of his fabricated testimony. However, while the courtroom melodrama unraveled, a lethal struggle was underway behind the scenes. Barboza's treachery had not slipped past unnoticed. The mob thirsted for vengeance, and Barboza was their primary target. His every action was scrutinized, every utterance he made carried the hazard of revealing his new persona. In this perilous chase of predator and prey, no one was secure. Even within the safety of the witness protection program, Barboza was unable to elude his history. A man accustomed to violence and betrayal, he found himself the victim of the same treachery he had previously dealt out. In spite of the government's most fervent attempts to shield him, his history tracked him down. Joseph Barboza, infamously known as the Animal, was a feared mob enforcer for the Patriarcha criminal syndicate. His reputation was so terrifying, so spine-chilling, that even the dark corners he inhabited quivered at the mention of his name. But a creature, once domesticated, can never truly reclaim its wild nature. Such was the case with Barboza. After becoming a government informant, he was integrated into the witness protection program. A fresh identity, a novel life, an opportunity for a clean slate. At least that's what it appeared to be. However, the shadows of the criminal underworld are far-reaching and persistent. Even the most fortified havens can be infiltrated by a persistent foe. And Barboza had accumulated an abundance of enemies. The Patriarcha criminal family, the very group he had once executed orders for, had placed a huge bounty for his treachery. They had been strategically patient, waiting for the opportune moment to retaliate. In 1976, their patience bore fruit. In some inexplicable way, Barboza's location was divulged. His location, once a top-secret matter, was disclosed to his most lethal enemies. The once predator had become the prey of the Patriarcha crime family. While walking to his car, Barboza was gruesomely gunned down in the street. With 4 men armed, they opened fire on the animal at close range with shotguns, a chilling conclusion to a brutal existence full of treachery. His murderers, as it is believed, were the very men he had once considered comrades, the very men he had forsaken. They say that in the realm of organized crime, allegiance is paramount. Barboza had violated this fundamental principle, and he paid the ultimate penalty. His tale stands as a stark warning that in this perilous game there are no victors, only survivors. And even they bear the wounds of their history, an incessant reminder of the life they once led. The resonance of Barboza's existence and demise persistently pulsates throughout the chronicles of criminal history. As we explore the aftermath of Joe the Animal Barboza's tumultuous existence, it's apparent that his deeds sent seismic ripples across both the Patriarcha underworld fraternity and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Barboza's treachery dealt a substantial blow to the Patriarcha clan. His testimony, riddled with lies and partial truths, resulted in the indictment of 6 men for a homicide they weren't guilty of. The Animal was more clever than expected, managing to pin his own homicides on men he once called comrades. This was a crushing blow for the Mafia in New England, destabilizing their stronghold and planting suspicion within their echelons. The eradication of these men, coupled with the terror of further traitorous acts, was an injury from which the Patriarcha clan could never truly heal. On the flip side, Barboza's collaboration appeared to be a highly profitable victory for the FBI. They had penetrated the impervious realm of organized crime, leveraging one of its most infamous killers to catalyze its demise. However, the fallout from their alliance with Barboza was extensive and laced with controversy. The FBI's engagement of felonious informers, especially those as volatile and capricious as Barboza, incited fiery disputes. Their strategies undeniably bore fruit, but at what expense? The ethical connotations of their pact with Barboza, a figure renowned for his brutal propensities and readiness to perjure, cast a lengthy pall over their triumph. The erroneous testimony of Barboza and the FBI's involvement in it called into question the very essence of fairness. It's a prickly matter, one that compels us to ponder hard-hitting queries about the extreme measures we're prepared to undertake in the name of veracity and reprisal. What does it insinuate about our judicial system when it leans on the statement of a person like Barboza, a man whose life was steeped in atrocity and deceit? In the realm of crime and justice, the boundary between justice and injustice can frequently become indistinct. And in the tale of Joe the Animal Barboza, that boundary was transgressed, redefined and violated once more. It's a bone-chilling memento of the multifaceted, often opaque terrain of crime and its aftermath, a terrain forever tainted by the spectre of Joe the Animal Barboza. In the shadowy depths of Chicago's underworld, a bone-chilling saga comes to life. The year is 1977, and an infamous gangster meets his sudden, horrific demise. Let's delve into the existence of Charles Nicoletti, a man more commonly recognized by his sobriquet, Chucky the Typewriter. An epithet that might invoke images of a spectacled man bent over a typewriter in a barely lit room. Yet, this moniker was far from literal. Our Chucky wasn't an author, but he was renowned for leaving a distinctive mark, a mark that was usually permanent. Chucky was a pivotal member of the dreaded Chicago outfit, a felonious syndicate that dominated the city's underworld with a steel grip. A hired assassin by profession, he served under the infamous boss Sam Giancana. In unison, they spun a web of villainy and rot that extended all throughout the city. But that's not where it ends. Gossip encircled Chucky like insects drawn to a light. Murmurs of his participation in one of the most startling events of the 20th century, the brutal torture and killing of Billy McCarthy. Seeking retribution for 2 of his slain members, Chucky and 3 others kidnapped Billy and squeezed his head in a vice until his eyeball popped out of his skull. Billy quickly gave up the info and was executed while Nicoletti ate a bowl of pasta. Adding to his extensive list of murders and crimes, it's also been rumored that he was involved in the termination of President John F. Kennedy. A shocking revelation that reverberated through the back streets of Chicago. But even in the realm of organized crime, the most dreaded characters aren't indomitable. It's a realm where loyalties fluctuate as swiftly as the breeze, where companions can transform into adversaries in a heartbeat. For every deed, there's a consequence. For every hit, there's a counterstrike. Such was the case for our friend Chucky. A lifetime spent in obscurity, performing the illicit tasks of others, was fated to track him down sooner or later. And on March 29th, the predator turned prey. In a tranquil residential car park in North Lake, Illinois, the curtain was drawn for the ultimate scene in Nicoletti's existence. This seemingly unimportant location, far distant from the lively narrow lanes and smoke-cloaked interiors of the Chicago underworld, was destined to be the closing chapter in the existence of Charles Nicoletti. Familiar to his accomplices as Chucky the Typewriter, Nicoletti was no foreigner to the shadowy realm of life. As an executioner for the Chicago outfit, he was proficient in the craft of the terminal performance. The startling find of his body sent shockwaves to the early dawn guests of a neighborhood eatery. A scene of harsh conclusion awaited them in the car park. Nicoletti's lifeless body lay slumped over the steering wheel, 3 bullets in the back of his head. Surprisingly, he was rushed to the hospital where he survived for another 6 hours before finally succumbing to his wounds. A man whose life was bathed in the blood of others met a fitting end. A horrifying notion that such an infamous character could be shot down and abandoned in the frosty, pitch-dark night. But who could kill such a high-ranking member of the mob? In an unexpected turn of events, the pointer of doubt aims not at a competing mob, but to a figure within Nicoletti's own circle. Welcome Harry Ailman, a comrade in arms, a man who once aligned with Nicoletti himself. Ailman was a moniker spoken with a tremble in the realm of obscurity and mysteries that cloak Chicago's criminal underworld. He had a reputation for his chilling precision and relentless faithfulness to the Chicago outfit, identical to the faction that Nicoletti employed as a contract killer. You may ponder, what could provoke a man to betray someone from his own group? Why would Ailman, a man who served the same master as Nicoletti, have a reason to assassinate him? Well, dear audience, the organized crime reality isn't as clear-cut as it appears. The ties of allegiance can be as fragile as a hair's breadth, and the pursuit of authority can morph even the closest of comrades into lethal foes. Let's probe a bit deeper. Ailman, akin to Nicoletti, was a practiced assassin. He was familiar with the chessboard of power and survival, And on this chessboard, Nicoletti was a significant piece. Nicoletti had a notoriety that could make even the most steeled criminals reconsider. His purported involvement in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was proof of his impact and reach. Regardless of the conjectures and the murmurs, the reality continues to be enshrouded in an enigma. The murder of Charles Nicoletti, also known as Chucky the typewriter, is a riddle that perpetually baffles true crime aficionados, detectives, and scholars. Engulfed in unlawful deeds, Nicoletti's life concluded with an ending as theatrical as his existence. On that doomed day in March 1977, Nicoletti's lifeless body was discovered in a restaurant parking area in Northlake, Illinois. But who was the executioner? That query has been the pivotal point of a continuing probe that spanned over 4 decades. Theories targeted Harry Ailman, a fellow syndicate hitman. However, despite the murmurs and covert talks, no definitive proof has truly tied Aleman to Nicoletti's murder. The case, replete with roadblocks and elusive hints, has been a non-stop uphill struggle for the police. Assumptions and hypotheses are plentiful, each more intriguing than its predecessor. Was it a dominance contest within the Chicago outfit, an outcome of Nicoletti's supposed role in the Kennedy assassination? Or maybe, as some have speculated, was this a retaliation for becoming an FBI informant? The responses remain ambiguous, and the reality is as elusive as the infamous gangster himself. The Nicoletti case serves as a vivid reminder of the intricacy of structured delinquency, where allegiance is short-lived and treachery is frequently rewarded with a deadly hit. It's an underworld where secrets are traded like commodities, and the reality is often concealed alongside its casualties. Hypotheses, conjectures, and murmurs are all we possess in our pursuit to elucidate this unsolved murder. The absence of a solution, though, doesn't lessen the fascination surrounding Nicoletti's case. In contrast, it enriches an already gripping tale, a narrative that continues to ensnare true crime fans globally. The tale of Charles Nicoletti is a cautionary narrative, a dark mirror of a life operating on the fringe of ethics and legality. His existence and termination serve as a chilling testimony to the scope and savagery of organized crime. A hair-raising narrative indeed, one that leaves us with more questions than answers, but isn't that the charm of true crime?
In the chronicles of illicit activities, few monikers echo the bone-chilling terror of Albert Anastasia. Born as Umberto Anastasio in 1902, he emerged from the pastoral vistas of Italy before voyaging across the Atlantic to the pulsating metropolis of New York City. The Big Apple, a city pulsating with dreams and potential, also served as the playground for criminal enterprises, a sphere that the young Albert was soon to infiltrate and rule. His initiation into crime was not a coincidence, but a strategic step into a world that would carve his future. The bustling boulevards of New York, brimming with vitality and shadowed by enigma, became his training grounds, schooling him in the brutal curriculum of survival and dominion. It wasn't long before his initial brush with the mob would invariably script his trajectory. In no time, he transformed from a humble immigrant into a formidable entity in the dominion of organized crime. As a young adult, Albert Anastasia was already on a fateful path, and the criminal underworld of New York City was about to become his stage. The 1920s witnessed the meteoric ascent of Albert Anastasia, born Umberto Anastasio, within the hierarchy of the American Mafia. From beginnings rooted in the rural landscape of Italy, Anastasia's name swiftly became a symbol of authority and dread in New York City's underworld. Amidst the turbulent 20s, his identity became inextricably linked with the Castellamarese War, a violent contest for supremacy that shook the Mafia's foundation. This war was a battle of wits and savagery among mobsters lurking in the city's darkest corners, rather than soldiers in trenches. Anastasia was one of these shadowy figures, and his part in the conflict was highly significant. He played a crucial role in the assassination of his superior, Giuseppe Masseria. This audacious act, however controversial, marked a pivotal moment in Anastasia's rise within the Mafia's ranks. The reign of Anastasia was marked by a heartless demeanor that would terrify even the most hardened criminals. His penchant for violence earned him several ominous nicknames, from the one-man army, Mad Hatter, and the Lord High Executioner. These monikers were apt, as he conducted his business with the unflinching precision of an executioner, putting terror in his adversaries' hearts. His dominion over the waterfront of New York City was unrivaled, and he exercised his authority relentlessly. Anastasia played a significant role in the creation and leadership of Murder, Inc., a feared enforcement branch of the National Crime Syndicate. This group lived up to its menacing name, suspected and accountable for upwards of 1,000 homicides and enforcement of the Mafia's rules. Despite his infamous criminal exploits, Anastasia always managed to elude the grasp of justice. Legal convictions slipped him, often due to the absence of witnesses courageous or reckless enough to stand against him. This epitomized the terror he inspired and the sway he held. Anastasia's influence and power swelled, cementing his position as a formidable figure in the Mafia landscape. His rise was rapid, his dominion unquestioned, yet as history has repeatedly demonstrated, even the most powerful empires can crumble. Anastasia held not just power, but a daunting responsibility that he executed with chilling precision. He was the tyrannical mastermind behind the Gambino crime syndicate, tightening his hold over New York City's bustling seaports. His reign transformed the docks into a den of organized criminal activities, a hub for illegal operations spanning gambling, prostitution, racketeering, and worst of all, murder. The Mad Hatter was more than a mere leader. He was a criminal visionary, recognizing the untapped potential within organized crime and it to unforeseen heights. His strategic brilliance led to the creation of the formidable enforcement wing of the national crime syndicate, Murder, Inc. This was far from your average gang. It was a seamlessly functioning system of professional assassins, cold-blooded and efficient. Accused of orchestrating high-profile assassinations, including the vanishing of rival mob leader Vincent Mangano, his reign was characterized by horrifying savagery, earning him another moniker, the Earthquake. His offenses were countless, his victims innumerable, yet Anastasia skillfully dodged punishment for many of his wrongdoings, primarily due to a dearth of witnesses ready to testify. It wasn't a lack of witnesses, but the absence of those courageous enough to stake their lives by standing against him. His presence instilled breathtaking terror throughout the city. It wasn't merely the dread of physical harm that silenced people. It was the anxiety of the unknown, the apprehension about the fate of their loved ones and their means of survival if they dared to defy the Mad Hatter. His rule represents a haunting epoch in the city's past, an era when the Mafia's omnipotent control was palpable by all. Anastasia's reign was a gloomy chapter in the metropolis's history, a period when New York City's streets were governed by apprehension, and the name Albert Anastasia had become a terrifying synonym for death. Like all dominions, Anastasia's epoch too was destined to conclude. As the head honcho of the Gambino crime syndicate, Albert Anastasia's reign was far from tranquil. Scandals encircled him, each one further tarnishing his already blood-soaked reputation. Among these, his supposed involvement in the vanishing of rival mob leader Vincent Mangano was the most notable. The specifics remained veiled in obscurity, but one fact was evident. Crossing paths with Anastasia necessitated vigilance. As time lapsed, the murmurs amplified, and the gloom around him deepened. Yet the Lord High Executioner appeared imperishable, unaffected by the law, until one ill-fated day in 1957. As New York City pulsated with existence, Anastasia's life was ruthlessly snatched away. On that fateful afternoon, Anastasia's driver dropped him off at his regular barbershop and parked in the garage below. As he sat in the chair, hot towel around his face, two men entered the shop with scarves covering their heads. Pushing the barber aside, they unloaded a barrage of bullets at the unprepared crime boss. Surprisingly, the Mad Hatter survived and lunged at his attackers, but in the confusion of shock, he leaped at the mirror reflecting his attackers and was gunned down in the second round of shots. Executed in a barbershop chair, the once formidable mob leader became a mere newspaper headline, a horrifying memento of the life he led and the adversaries he fashioned. The perpetrator behind the assassination? That's a mystery interred with Anastasia. However, speculations abound about Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino. This catalyzed a monumental shift in the American Mafia's power hierarchy. With Anastasia eliminated, a new commander, Carlo Gambino, ascended from the ruins. A man known for his circumspect nature, now controlled the family. Under Gambino's command, the syndicate experienced a metamorphosis. He navigated the family through the crimson streets of New York into the sphere of white-collar criminality, solidifying its position as one of the most influential crime families in the U.S. It marked the cessation of an epoch, the conclusion of the Earthquake's rule, but the aftershocks of his deeds lingered. Anastasia's demise signaled the termination of an era, but his legacy endured. His existence served as a reminder of the American dream's sinister undercurrent, a warning of the perils of power, trepidation, and ultimately downfall. Anastasia's dominion continues to echo in the realm of organized crime. Albert Anastasia, initially named Umberto Anastasia, was far more than a mere gangster. He evolved as a force, a nightmare, and a legend in his own right. His narrative, punctuated by violence and heartlessness, stands as an illustration of the American dream's sinister side. Anastasia's existence was a chain of daring deeds, each surpassing the previous in audacity. From his ascension in the American Mafia to his dominion over New York City's harbor, his sway was significant and deep-rooted. He played a pivotal role in the Castellamarese War, participating in the assassination of his own leader. And we cannot overlook his command of Murder Inc., the infamous enforcement branch of the National Crime Syndicate. Talk about an adept juggler. In spite of his criminal activities, Anastasia frequently dodged penalization. It wasn't due to fortune or scarcity of evidence, but rather the absence of witnesses willing to stand against him. It's understandable, given his intimidating aliases such as the Earthquake and the Lord High Executioner. Who would wish to encounter him? His rule met a brutal finish in 1957 when he was slain on the directives of Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino. A suitable finale, some might suggest, for a man who lived through violence. Yet his downfall didn't signify the termination of his influence. Rather, it signified the inception of a fresh epoch in organized crime, with Carlo Gambino emerging as the new head of the family. Even today, Albert Anastasia's legacy persists. His strategies, his savagery, and his astuteness continue to mold the sphere of organized crime. His tale serves as a frosty warning of the extremes some are willing to pursue for supremacy and domination. So as we retreat from Albert Anastasia's murky and warped world, we're confronted with a chilling truth. The reverberations of his rule continue to pulsate through the world of organized crime, embodying the frightening potency he once held. Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner, may no longer exist, but his narrative endures as an icy chapter in the chronicles of true crime.
Dive into the confounding life of Sam Giancana, a figure deeply rooted in organized crime and political intrigue. Sam Giancana, christened Guillermo Giancana, was born on the 24th of May 1908 in the bustling city of Chicago. His beginnings were humble but tinged with an edge of danger. His childhood a trial by fire into the hidden underbelly of society. Stepping into the world as Sam Giancana, he was quick to exploit opportunities that came his way, demonstrating a ruthless drive as he punctuated his life with ambition and cunning. His understanding of the criminal world's workings propelled him to seize control of illegal gambling and liquor distribution across Louisiana, leaving an indelible mark as a formidable player in the world of organized crime. Yet the Bayou State's borders were not the limits of his ambition or influence. He extended his reach into the pulsating heart of American politics, with his name frequently associated with one of the most pivotal events of the 20th century, the election of John F. Kennedy. Whispers of Giancana's supposed involvement in the election and alleged plots to assassinate Fidel Castro persist to this day. However, it was not these political schemes that brought about his downfall. In 1965, Giancana was convicted of contempt of court, a conviction that sent him fleeing to Mexico. Yet he found that he couldn't escape the law's relentless pursuit, even in exile. In 1974, he was deported back to the United States. As we delve deeper into the intriguing life of Giancana, we will uncover the actions and associations that culminated in his contentious legacy and the enigma surrounding his untimely death. Witness the dark ascent of Sam Giancana, not merely an underworld figure, but the ruler of the Chicago outfit. Born as Guillermo Giancana in the era of speakeasies and bootleggers, Sam was well acquainted with the shadows. His encounters with illegality paved the way for a life submerged in crime, which would eventually crown him as one of the most infamous mob bosses of his era. His climb to power within the Chicago outfit, a notable crime syndicate, took root in 1957. The outfit's ventures were vast and diverse, spanning from illicit gambling to bootlegging, and Sam stood at the heart of it all. He maneuvered this intricate network of crime, making strategic moves that would influence not just the syndicate, but also the Windy City and beyond. His reach was broad. From Louisiana's gaming and liquor sectors to the upper ranks of the outfit, Sam's hold over organized crime was ironclad. His methods were merciless, his moves methodical. He was a man who knew how to obtain his way to his goals regardless of the price. However, his notorious status wasn't only due to his illegal undertakings. Sam was also recognized for his networking skills, his knack for forging alliances with influential personalities across various political and industrial sectors. These relationships would later become pivotal in his rise, linking him to some of the most historical events and figures of his era. However, his ascent wasn't without resistance, needless to say. In the depths of the underworld, his adversaries were plentiful of those who plotted against him. But Sam was not to be easily discouraged. He confronted these obstacles with fierce determination, handling them in his own distinct, often brutal manner. By 1966, Sam had solidified his position as a daunting figure in the underworld. He had ascended the ranks of criminality, from a mere gangster to the head of one of the most formidable crime organizations in America. His sway reached beyond the alleys and speakeasies, infiltrating even the halls of political power, which you will soon discover. But it was his shadowy rise to power, an odyssey marked by ambition, relentlessness, and an unwavering pursuit of dominance that led him to such an influential position within the political realm. As mentioned, Giancana's reach extended far beyond the murky underworld, penetrating the most powerful corridors of American society. His journey from mob boss to political string puller was both magnificent and scandalous, a metamorphosis that propelled this infamous character into a surprising role within the country's political sphere. Sam Giancana, a man whose hands were steeped in the filth of organized crime, found himself ensnared in a complex weave of political subterfuge. Hushed conversations, rumors and claims, all alluding to his role in the election of none other than John F. Kennedy. His ties to the Kennedys, America's equivalent of royalty, added yet another element of intrigue to this mobster's multifaceted identity. Yet Giancana's political ventures were not confined to election campaigns. In a twist fit for a blockbuster movie, the CIA allegedly enlisted him for a mission to eliminate Fidel Castro. Picture this: a mobster on the CIA payroll. This was an affirmation of Giancana's power, his reach, and his boldness. His association with the CIA wasn't a mere side note in Giancana's life. It was a perilous partnership, a dance with danger that exposed him to the world of espionage and secret operations. His existence was no longer merely about illegal betting or alcohol trafficking. He was elevated into global politics, influencing the direction of world affairs. However, as with all of Giancana's life, his political ventures came with a hefty price. The spotlight illuminated him, and the scrutiny that ensued began to erode his once invincible status. The man who once ruled as King of Chicago with an iron grip was now merely a pawn in a grander scheme. His political involvement, though, would ultimately precipitate his downfall. As the adage goes, the higher you ascend, the harder you plummet. And for Sam Giancana, the fall was as theatrical as his rise. No amount of power or influence could shield Giancana from the relentless pursuit of justice. Trapped in a legal quagmire, our mobster friend Sam was convicted of contempt of court in 1965. But Sam, always one step ahead, opted for an abrupt departure to Mexico, trading the chilly winds of Chicago for a warmer, tequila-laden climate. However, his notorious past was a spectre he couldn't shake off, even in Mexico. His infamous reputation had traveled faster than he had, and justice wasn't about to give him a reprieve. So, almost 10 years later, in 1974, Mexico decided it had had its fill of Chicago's infamous mob boss, promptly returning him to Uncle Sam. Talk about a chilly homecoming. His return back to American soil was far from celebratory. Not only was he facing repercussions from the law, but it was his return to the US that would mark his final chapter. A chapter steeped in mystery, filled with conspiracy theories, and culminating in an unresolved ending that keeps true crime aficionados engrossed to this day. On the brink of his church committee testimony, Sam Giancana, the high-profile mobster and political puppeteer, met a violent end. In the twilight of 1975, Giancana was slain in his Oak Park residence, a hushed suburb of Chicago. His life, as provocative as it was impactful, was rudely interrupted by a barrage of bullets. The instrument of his death, a .22 caliber pistol muffled by a suppressor at point-blank range. The particulars of the crime scene depicted a horrifying tableau. Giancana, in solitude in his basement, was in the middle of fixing a nocturnal meal when an unidentified attacker, or possibly a familiar figure, stealthily appeared. 7 shots rang out, 4 landing at the back of his head, 3 in his mouth, a savage trademark of a Mafia execution termed as the Mo Green Special. No evidence of forced entry, no traces of a struggle. It seemed Giancana had welcomed his executioner, implying a degree of trust or acquaintance. But who could have desired the infamy of the mob boss terminated? This query remains unresolved. the list of hypothetical culprits as extensive as the shadow Giancana cast in his lifetime. Some conjecture points towards Giancana's chauffeur Butch Blasi. Even the CIA has been implicated in rumors, given Giancana's alleged participation in schemes to eliminate Fidel Castro. However, the most likely culprit seemed to be a close friend, Anthony "Ant" Spilotro, who was known to have a secret route into Giancana's home where the two would meet late at night. Still, in spite of the plethora of conjectures, no charges were ever filed. Prime suspects and those who could have commanded the hit have since departed, taking with them any possibility of retribution in Giancana's case. His murder is a mystery, an eerie reminder of the sinister world Giancana inhabited. His demise signified the close of an epoch, a startling end to a life saturated in crime, power, and political stratagems. The puzzle surrounding his murder only amplifies the riddle that was Sam Giancana, his life and deeds persisting to fascinate and perplex those who explore the annals of organized crime. The life and death of Sam Giancana continue to be an enthralling saga of power, crime, and enigma. In the core of Hell's Kitchen, a notorious Irish-American mob kingpin reigned, blending brutality with a touch of elegance. Known as Mickey Spillane, he wasn't your average criminal. Spillane earned the title of the gentleman gangster, a nickname reflecting his distinct fusion of strength and refinement. As a child, Spillane showed exceptional skills and was promoted ahead 2 grades at the Sacred Heart School. At 12, he was awarded a scholarship to Rice High School in Manhattan. But at the age of 17, life took an unexpected turn. Mickey's mother, now widowed, was suffering and in need of help. In an attempt to provide for his mum, he robbed a movie theatre. In his escape, a police officer shot him, and Spillane was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Upon his release, he quickly entered the underworld, running numbers until his mentor, Huey Mulligan, died, leaving the racket to Mickey. Amidst the tumultuous 60s and 70s, he ascended to authority, taking over Hell's Kitchen with a tactical finesse and a sharp sense for prospects. His dominion was unyielding, his sway extensive, his command undisputed. However, it was his firm opposition to Italian mobsters that truly distinguished him. In a time when alliances in organized crime were as unpredictable as the currents of the Hudson River, Spillane was an immovable force. He denied Italian mobsters any share in his domain, a choice that sparked the infamous Irish-Italian mob war of the 70s. This was far from a conventional rivalry. It was a savage, violent battle that raged through the avenues of Hell's Kitchen, setting the Irish against the Italians in a fierce fight for control. Throughout the tumultuous trials, Spillane held steadfast. He was a formidable foe, a man of conviction, a gangster who followed his own code. Such boldness was a rarity in the underworld. Nevertheless, even as he was establishing his kingdom in Hell's Kitchen, the roots of his undoing were taking hold. His stubborn refusal to divide his territory with the Italians painted a bullseye on him. Ultimately, his insistence on standing alone developed into a vulnerability. The very characteristics that had catapulted him to the underworld's apex were now on the verge of dragging him to rock bottom. But even the reign of the gentleman gangster had an expiration date. Defiance is a double-edged sword, and for Mickey Spillane it was the cutting edge that concluded his dominion. As the gentleman gangster, Spillane held an iron fist over Hell's Kitchen throughout the 60s and 70s. However, his denial to grant Italian mobsters a share of the prosperity in his territory instigated rising tensions, eventually leading to the Irish-Italian War of the 70s. Spillane, recognized for his poised demeanor and steadfast command, was not one to yield. His audacity nonetheless was ill-received by the Italian mob. They perceived his defiance as a provocation, an intimidation to their supremacy. The frosty rapport between the two groups turned chillier, with each party pledging to guard its turf relentlessly. The turning point of these brewing tensions occurred in 1977. Spillane, the once undisputed kingpin, was murdered outside his apartment in Queens. His downfall signified a notable shift in the underworld. It served as a stern warning that even the most dominant can crumble, and that defiance, though commendable, can sometimes lead to a catastrophic end. In the wake of Spillane's assassination, a new influence surfaced. Jimmy Coonan ascended to prominence, associating himself with the Gambino crime family. Unlike Spillane, Coonan extended a welcome to the Italian mobsters into his territory, indicating a deviation in the dynamics of organized crime in Hell's Kitchen. With Spillane's downfall, Hell's Kitchen witnessed the dawn of a new era of mob dominance. His demise was a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of power and the repercussions of defiance in a world where alliances often signify the thin line between survival and extinction. Even following his demise, Mickey Spillane's influence hung heavy over Hell's Kitchen. The lanes he once dominated with unyielding authority, yet with a cultivated manner, didn't easily dismiss their departed overlord. His name, murmured in muted whispers, turned into a sign of authority and rebellion, an echo of an era when the Irish held sway over this New York enclave. The resonance of Spillane's sway continues to reverberate today. Enclosed within the core of Hell's Kitchen stands a tavern bearing his name, a tangible tribute to his lasting impact, a locale where anecdotes of the gentleman gangster are exchanged over mugs of ale, where the vibe of the 60s and 70s persists. It's as if Spillane never truly vanished, his essence enduring in the chime of drinkware and the merriment that permeates the atmosphere. However, the narrative of Mickey Spillane isn't just filled with enchanting chronicles of mafia control and territorial disputes. The narrative of the Spillane clan was blemished by misfortune. In 2010, more than 30 years after Spillane's own brutal demise, his progeny Robert met with an unfortunate end. A stark reminder that the spectre of the criminal world often casts a daunting shadow over the ones left to survive. Yet even amidst the grief, Mickey Spillane's influence endures, not just at a pub in Hell's Kitchen, but in the shared memories of its denizens. His journey has been intertwined with the very essence of this vicinity. His moniker indelible in its history, his reign, his downfall, and his tragic finale have evolved into a fabled legend. A narrative iterated and reiterated, each time with an added layer of lore. And with each forthcoming year, the myth of Mickey Spillane, the gentleman gangster, continues to live on. Amidst the peaks and valleys, the victories and the calamities, his moniker remains emblematic of Hell's Kitchen, an element of its persona, a fragment of its spirit. The gentleman gangster's influence, for good or ill, is deeply ingrained in the chronicles of Hell's Kitchen.